So I tried to manage my expectations as best I could when I first saw the trailer of Wolfman because I thought it looked really good. And then I saw that it was by Blumhouse being released in January, which to me is what I like to refer to as the horror graveyard. So then all of a sudden I found my expectations on the floor. And I know that sounds really harsh, but just given my experience of Blumhouse movies last year in particular, they're not really hitting for me lately. And then I saw a few early reviews coming in and they weren't fantastic. So I was like, okay, let's just see what it is. I'll, review it on my own and like have my own opinions. And you guys, I actually really liked this movie. It's been a while since I've said that about a Blumhouse movie. Speak No Evil wasn't terrible, but the bigger budget Blumhouse is a little bit better than the other ones, you know what I mean? So Blake and his family are attacked by an unseen animal and in a desperate escape barricade themselves inside a farmhouse as the creature prowls the perimeter. As the night stretches on, however, Blake begins to behave strangely, transforming into something unrecognizable that soon jeopardizes his wife and daughter. So this is written and directed by Leigh Whannell, which this is his second Universal monster that he has taken on, the first one being The Invisible Man that came out in 2020. And I think that's exactly why this movie ended up being good for me, and I have been, we'll talk about the mixed reviews at the end of the video and like the ratings and everything because it's just a little bit shocking for me, from my experience. Did we watch the same movie? I don't know. But Leigh Whannell, I think, saved this movie for me, and I really enjoyed the writing, and I don't know, I feel like that's why I enjoyed this movie. So this video is actually going to be me convincing you that Wolfman is actually a good movie. Like, I'm gonna spend the whole time telling you exactly why it's a good movie and why you need to change your opinion if you thought it was bad. Obviously, I'm joking, okay? We're all entitled to our own opinions, whether we're wrong or not. Again, I'm joking. Anyway, I do actually have my, it does have flaws. I do have some criticisms about this movie. So it is not a perfect movie. And I did only give this 3.5, but I feel like a lot of the reviews and comments and things being made about this movie are a little bit harsh and, it doesn't have to work for everyone. I feel like there's very specific reasons why this movie worked for me personally, so I'll get into all of that. But first I want to talk about how the practical effects were. So Leigh Whannell was inspired by movies like The Fly, The Thing, to only use practical effects. And he added his own spin on it, and I really liked the changes he brought to the Wolfman as a universal monster. So it's not necessarily like all the other werewolf movies we've seen, and it's not like all the other Wolfman movies that have come out. And I really like the emotional aspect that Leigh Whannell brought to the story of this movie and kind of the transformation and what that would look like if it was like a slower transformation instead of like the fast turnaround that we usually get in werewolf movies. So this is a quote from Leigh Whannell. He says, "What The Fly did that a lot of other practical effects driven horror movies from that time did not do was bring the tragedy out of these practical effects. It wasn't a joke in The Fly. It was there to illustrate someone who was dying of an illness. I was like, I've got to do that. It's not about being funny or icky or gory. This is about tragedy of the human body falling apart." And I think that's exactly why I loved this movie, is he brought so many emotions to the story and the characters and their interactions and their dynamic. I actually cried twice while watching this movie, which did not anticipate from a January Blumhouse movie to just make me cry. Why'd you do that? I didn't sign up for that. So I think he really succeeded in portraying the tragedy of this transformation instead of kind of your straightforward werewolf movie where it's a quick change, quick transformation, and then they rip people apart and it's really gory. And it does have those moments as well. It is gory, and there are some very disturbing. There's one scene in particular that is very disturbing to look at, and it made me feel so uncomfortable. And then it's juxtaposed with like, oh, and I'm crying. I'm crying again. So I can see why this movie did get some negative reviews, because I think people were expecting your more traditional werewolf movie or other Wolfman interpretations that, that it would be similar to those. And I really enjoyed that it wasn't like that, because I think we do need more werewolf movies. We do do have plenty within this century, within the last couple decades, but I do feel like it's not as oversaturated as other subgenres of horror. There's room for more werewolf movies is what I'm trying to say. And oftentimes those kind of stories don't explore the sadness of losing oneself entirely, and from that perspective of losing control and just you not being able to understand the people around you, and just that slow progression and how painful that transformation actually could be. You know what does do that? All the young dudes Harry Potter fanfic that I'm reading right now. But I digress. Now, that wasn't the only thing that, to me, set it apart from other werewolf movies, other horror movies, and hell, even other Blumhouse movies, let's just say that. But first, I do want to say and clarify, this is not the most original movie ever made, okay? It does play out pretty predictably. A lot of the twists and turns and where the story goes is expected. It's predictable. For me, I didn't hate that. This was a very easy watch. It's not twisting your brain around. It's not mind-bending by any means. Even with the emotional storyline, it does feel like a familiar formula, familiar recipe for a traditional horror movie. So, no, you know, I feel like that's another critique that people are saying is what was the point? It was pointless. It was derivative. It was the same old, it was predictable. But you know what? I kind of liked that aspect. I know that's really weird. It has to be done right, and it has to be done with the right arrangement and combination of elements, such as in Wolfman with the emotional storyline and things like that. If it's arranged properly, sometimes it's nice to just watch a movie that is expected and it's not twisty, and it doesn't necessarily do anything new. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's just being a movie, you know? As long as it's well acted, it's shot beautifully. This movie in particular had many beautiful scenes, which I will talk about. It doesn't matter that much if it's like what you signed up for. Like, it's a werewolf movie, yes, it does something really unique with that, but I just feel like there's like peace in that viewing experience, you know what I mean? It's just like a comfy watch at that point. So let's talk about a couple more of the unique things that this movie does. Again, not saying this is the most original, unique movie to ever come out or the best werewolf movie ever made, okay? I'm just pointing that out, but it did some really cool things that I think was unique for a werewolf movie. So it was like maybe been done before in some other capacity, sure. But in this movie in particular, I feel like it felt fresh. It was like a breath of fresh air to me. The sound design. The sound design was phenomenal. Firstly, with everything regarding sound. The score, the audio of the voices and things. That sounds weird, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It had this great score, and honestly, I'm not really someone where like a score will stand out to me, or like the music and things. I don't really look for that myself. I get asked questions all the time, what movies have your favorite score? And I just don't really know, because they have to be really strong for them to stand out to me. And this is a time where I was like noticing the sound design and like the score happening in the background during tense moments. And then the audio itself from the film, from the actors, the characters, and what's going on was just phenomenal, which leads me into my next point of something unique that I really loved about this movie was the POV. The playing with the POV, I thought was really well done and really cool. I won't expand too much on it because this is a spoiler-free video, but just know there's some really cool perspective shots that were really unexpected, and I enjoyed it very, very much. So while the movie itself is not the most original, the story, even the emotional aspects, not the most original story ever made, that's fine. I think with some of the elements that it chose to use with playing with the POV and things like that, and injecting emotion into a werewolf transformation, I think those elements made it a unique experience still. Now, the emotions that this movie brought out of me, again, I can understand why that's not going to have as much of an impact for every single person. I have grief on the mind constantly as someone who is still grieving. Also, the fact I have a daughter, I think that made it a little bit more emotional for me. I think those were the elements that really brought the emotion out in me personally. So I still think it would affect most people. I mean, most people have experienced grief or will experience grief at some point in their lives. So it's a very like sympathetic emotion, I feel like, to feel. And then if you're a parent and you watch this, I feel like it hits a little bit more close to home and like that parent-child relationship. Now, this movie was inspired by Leigh Whannell's real life grief experience. So one of his very good friends struggled with ALS and eventually lost his life to ALS. And so he kind of got inspired for a story for Wolfman specifically of what would happen if the transformation was more like a degenerative disease that slowly overtook your body and you ultimately just like lost yourself and lost control in that. Also, the intimate drama was inspired by the fact that Lee and his wife, who originally helped him write the original script for Wolfman, they were parents within quarantine and the beginning of the pandemic. So they kind of use that trapped, isolated feeling in this movie. And also the concept of like inevitable sickness. And that actually leads me to the next thing that I really liked about this movie was it was single location. It was an isolated movie. And I love a single location. I mean, it's mostly single location. We start off in the beginning in the city and then we end up at this isolated farmhouse. And I really like that kind of setting. And then it all also takes place within one day. Again, minus the beginning and like the intro when they're in the city and like the flashback and everything. Once we are like in the meat of the movie, it's all within like 12 hours. So again, that kind of thing where it's one location, one night, it adds to that ease of viewing. And that might seem like a bad thing. Like, yeah, it's not going to be an Interstellar where you're jumping around. There's action all the time. This is a very small focused movie. And I really enjoy movies like that because then they can really be more impactful with the story, the characters, their dynamics, things like that. Also, people are criticizing the look of the werewolf, which I just want to say I don't get that at all. Like, yeah, sure, it's not like super original, I guess. Like, it's pretty typical what we would expect a werewolf to look like. I like that he kept it humanoid for the most part. Like, we don't necessarily get like a full-on dog, you know? It's kind of a combination of things. I prefer that when it comes to a monster, to have it be a little bit more humanoid, because then it's a little bit more horrifying. It's uncanny. It's more disturbing when you remember it like happened to a real human. But there was no CGI used, people, and I think we need to appreciate that fact that Leigh Whannell stuck to his guns and did only practical effects. And the actor sat in that chair for hours and hours. Like, he didn't sit in that chair that long just for you guys to be like, it was okay. It looks fine. Like, it looks bad. What do you mean? I feel like we need to appreciate the effort that goes into it. Granted, have there been bigger and better things done with practical effects? Sure. But working with the budget that they had and the time frame they had and like, you know, the movie itself, I feel like what they did, it was executed just fine. I feel like people are being a little bit nitpicky with how the werewolf looks because I thought it was still horrifying. And I really liked that there was a lot of love and references to other movies as well. Like I said, it was inspired by movies like The Thing and The Fly with the practical effects and the transformation. A little bit more horrifying and slow like that. And then also, obviously, American Werewolf in London and things. There's a little nod to Saw in this, of course, because Leigh Whannell did the original Saw movie. And then also Ginger Snaps, because the daughter's name is Ginger. I just like those little touches. Also, Leigh Whannell makes a voice cameo in this movie as well. Now, my last criticism of this movie, other than the fact it wasn't super original, is I feel like as much as I loved the character dynamics, I feel like the characters themselves were a little bit baseline, like shallow. I feel like they could have had a little bit more character development, especially with the wife and Julia Garner's character. She came across a little bit more cold and less emotional, which that was her character. That's how she's written. She's not as close with her daughter. Like, the daughter is very much close with the father. And so it was necessary for the plot, but then I feel like we don't get enough impact towards the end of the movie. Like, we needed a little bit more character development there and to make it a little bit more interesting. Besides that, though, I thought it was great. And honestly, again, my heart and my soul want to give it a 4 out of 5, but logistically and just realistically, I'm giving it a 3.5. But enjoyment-wise and like how hard it hit emotionally, 4 out of 5. But, you know, on a technical level and everything else, it's a 3.5. Can we talk about the ratings though? Let's talk about the ratings just for a second. I know they don't matter. Who cares? Whatever. Rotten Tomatoes, 52% critics, 58% audiences. This is one of those times where I enjoyed the movie and then I leave and I'm like, oh, everyone hates it. Like, did we watch the same movie? I don't see the reasons why everyone is hating on this movie, and I hope I've convinced some of you that this movie is actually decent, at least, and convinced some of you to go see it. As usual, Universal monsters don't really do great in the box office. I think Invisible Man was pretty successful, but besides that, like The Mummy bombed and things like that, so much so that they canceled all the other Universal monster movies that they were going to work on. But I feel like this one is really, really well done. This is definitely a rewatch for me. I want to own it, so hopefully my arguments have convinced you a little bit that it's a little bit better than everyone is saying. Letterboxd has a 2.6 average rating. Again, that's so harsh to me. To give it anything less than a 3 even, I feel like. And again, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. That's fine, but these are average ratings. So that means a majority of people are rating it around that. And that hurts. If one person gives it a 2.5, whatever, that's fine. But when everyone gives it a 2.5, it's like, I don't think it deserves that. So surprise to me that the Blumhouse movie of January is actually really good. That's really shocking that I would say that. Because, I mean, and maybe that's why I liked it, because my expectations, like, tanked after I saw that it was a Blumhouse movie in January. But Leigh Whannell saved it. I think it's going to be overlooked because of the horror graveyard of January and being a little bit of a Blumhouse movie. I didn't get that vibe, you know? I would love to hear your thoughts, though, on Wolfman. It's not just about my opinions. I want to hear all about it in the comments. I gave an argument why this is a good movie. If you want to debate me in the comments and tell me why you think it's a bad movie, feel free. Strongly disagree, but we can talk about it. So share all your thoughts in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.